This last session is as Jeff has mentioned, is a pre-recorded interview with a suicide loss survivor conducted by Dr. Jill Harkavy Friedman, who's Senior Vice President of Research at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Dr. Harkavy Friedman leads leads AFSP's extensive research program. They offer, which funds research grants, offers workshops to train researchers and disseminate research findings. Dr. Schatzberg has received grants as well as Dr. Bunny. And Dr. Harkavy Friedman is a published scientist in the field of suicidology and was recently selected to be a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And when I asked Dr. Harkavy Friedman to do this interview, I asked her to ask the suicide loss survivor what would be helpful to clinicians in their work with someone who has who's been affected by suicide. So listen carefully. I think you're going to find this as an excellent discussion. And I want to thank the suicide loss survivor for being willing to share her story and what can be helpful to clinicians, and also to thank AFSP for facilitating this excellent interview.
We're here today to talk about lived experience with suicide loss and suicide ideation and behavior. So with us today, we have a person, Jen Hoy, who will speak with us about her personal experience losing her brother, as well as her own mental health journey. So let's start first. Jen, what brought you to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention?
Well, as you said, I am a suicide loss survivor. I lost my brother Teddy in May of 2017. And, for the first several years following his death, I really didn't process a lot of the grief and complex emotions associated with his passing. And I found AFSP by chance one night when I wasn't having a great night. It was a very griefy night. And I saw an advertisement for a marathon in a month. And what I didn't realize is that AFSP was more than just an organization. It's a community of people who are motivated to bring hope to people. And that's exactly what I needed.
Can you tell us a little bit about your brother and what happened with him?
Sure. My brother, Teddy, died in May of 2017. He was 41 years old, just shy of 42. Growing up, I was super protective of him, and I took that role really seriously. And into adulthood, we were super close, and we confided in one another on every topic. In 2004, he did have a suicide attempt. And following that, he received inpatient treatment, and he seemed really invested in his own well-being. And at that time, he found a therapist and a psychiatrist to work with that he really liked. He gave up drinking, started attending 12-step meetings. He was active, had hobbies and friends, and it was like that for a decade. And then I got the call that he was gone. And what I didn't realize is that in the weeks leading up to his suicide, Teddy had started drinking again, stopped seeing his therapist, broke up with his girlfriends, canceled plans, called in sick to work for the first time in 20 years. And I think if I had known that, I would have pushed him a little further, given how close we were.
And how might you have known that?
Teddy was super responsible, and he really cared about his girlfriend and her son, and they spent a lot of time together. So just calling in sick to work and breaking up with the girlfriend, that would have been a red flag for me. We had had some loss in our family. We lost our grandmother at the beginning of the year, and she was the closest person to us. And then he lost his partner at work to cancer. And I know that both of those losses affected him. So I was looking to make sure he was okay. And even though we talked multiple times a day, he kept pieces of himself from me, like that he broke up with his girlfriend or had started drinking after many years. And so that's huge because I felt like of everyone, I knew him the best.
So that's really a challenge for family, that oftentimes people don't really know what's going on. Do you have any idea if his clinicians knew what was going on?
They didn't. And I suspect that he kind of put up that mask that he gave to all of us. I mean, he was a helper. He was the life of the party. He was the first one to crack a joke. I'm sure he went and kind of felt like, you know what, I don't want them to worry about me. So let me just act like everything's good. I've got this. And he really didn't.
Mm-hmm. So that's a really tough spot to have as a clinician to be in if the person you're working with isn't really telling you anything. So did the clinician ever have family contact or contact with anybody who might be able to connect with him?
Not until after his death.
Okay. So what impact did that loss have on you?
Honestly, my whole life is separated into two parts, before Teddy died and after. Seeing my parents live through the worst loss any parent could live through was difficult. And I tried so hard to be strong for them that I didn't manage or even process any of my feelings. My family was shattered. My marriage suffered. My relationship with my parents suffered. My kids all struggled. I struggled, but none of us spoke about it. And that was really difficult.
You never spoke about it? You never had conversations, talked about what happened?
No.
So did you speak to anyone?
Sometimes my best friend, but mostly I spent the first 3 years sitting up at night watching TV, sleeping 1 or 2 hours a day, stuffing my emotions with food. My husband threw himself into work. My kids did their own thing. And my parents really became shells of who they were previously.
Had you ever had any mental health treatment before Teddy died?
I had been seeing a therapist off and on for years because I had struggled with depression and anxiety myself. In fact, at the time that Teddy died, I was going through a particularly rough patch, and he would check in with me every day and send me silly little memes or GIFs or things to make me laugh. And so when I learned that he had been struggling himself, that was particularly hard for me to process because I felt like he was trying so hard to help me and he needed help himself.
Mm-hmm. And so what happened for you after Teddy died in terms of your mental health journey?
Well, the first 3 years I was fueled by rage. I was angry at everyone and everything. I was angry with my parents for forgetting they had a living child. I was angry with my brother for leaving. I was angry with people who complained about their siblings. I was angry with the lady at the grocery store. It didn't matter. I was angry. And I didn't recognize that anger was really my grief. And in that time, I gained almost 100 pounds. And then COVID hit and everyone was in my house and I couldn't just be home and be angry by myself. So I thought, I'm going to go for a walk because I need to get away from everyone. And what I realized is just that little bit of activity, I felt better. And I started to realize that I wasn't okay. And even though it was difficult to find a therapist for myself in the middle of a pandemic shutdown, I found someone that would meet with me on Zoom. And I started working through that. And I realized like being strong and shutting it down really wasn't doing anything but hurting myself and my whole family.
How did you tell the therapist your story? Did the therapist ask, or did you start with, I just lost my brother to suicide?
I started with the suicide loss.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody didn't, how could a therapist find out?
I think it's important to ask if you've experienced a suicide loss or support somebody who struggles with their mental health, because both of those things can have a huge impact on anyone.
Mm-hmm. So you found a therapist.
I did.
So what happened next? What was helpful?
We started talking through not only my feelings, but a lot of the kind of cognitive distortions and beliefs that I had developed over 40 something years that were kind of making it difficult for me to even start a healing journey, because I believed in my heart that I failed my brother, that I didn't deserve to be there, that he should be there. And so I wasn't participating in life because I didn't really feel like I deserved it. And so we focused a lot, not just on the distortion, the distorted thinking and the negative self-image and the shame and the guilt, but also on how do I manage my sleep hygiene? Because sleeping 1 to 2 hours a day, of course, I'm going to wake up and my anxiety baseline is going to be here. But manage taking care of myself. If like I could only commit to doing 3 things, could I make my bed, take a shower, and eat 1 healthy meal? Like that seems like something small, but at that time, that was huge. And also the physical activity, like maintaining an exercise routine, because for me, that was helping me manage a lot of these feelings that I couldn't process. And I didn't understand why at the beginning until it really became part of my daily routine. And so all of those things together were hugely helpful.
And you were engaging with your therapist at the time to help you figure that out and start doing those things?
Yes. Yep.
And what else helped? For 1 or 2 hours a week. What else did you find?
Well, for sure. Through the therapy process, she had suggested I look into finding a support group. And I found a virtual suicide loss survivor support group. And that first call, it was easy to do because I was home and I could join from home. And I realized that I wasn't alone and that all of these things that I was feeling and that were making me feel confused, because like, why was I feeling, I should just feel sad, not angry and guilty and full of shame, that everyone else was feeling similar things. They were experiencing them differently, but they felt the same.
And one feeling all the time, or many feelings all the time? Or
many feelings all the time. Like I look at that, the 7 stages of grief, and I didn't follow this linear pattern, and nobody else does. Like, I mean, it was like back and forth in circles. I could feel them all at once or nothing. And it changes over time, and it's been 6 years now. And there are some days that I would consider myself well and healthy. And then there are other days where it feels like I'm back on that day in May. It depends, but how you carry it changes, and how you manage those feelings change. But I think only if you get support.
Mm-hmm. And did you have any history in your family or yourself of suicidal ideation or mental health conditions or suicide?
Nothing that was talked about. So my grandparents' generation, my parents' generation, nothing was talked about. And growing up in a traditional Sicilian family, men are strong and women are caregivers. And so feelings weren't talked about.
So, and you're bringing up an important point. Like, how did your cultural background play a role or impact your grief process?
Enormously. Especially in my culture, my family's culture, you don't talk about something like that. I had a cousin that had died by suicide when I was little, and I just knew that my cousin passed away. I didn't know how, but no one talked about him, not even his dad. And years later, when I did an AFSP walk in Philadelphia with one of my cousins, he had said, like, this is the first time I feel like I can talk about my brother. And so it's really difficult shifting just a cultural way of being. And in the beginning, my family, I think my extended family, was almost embarrassed that I was super vocal on social media and with my activity with volunteering until they saw the impact that it was having.
Like
And-
what kind of impact?
Well, when I started walking, I got into running and I thought, you know what, I'll apply to run the Boston Marathon with AFSP because my brother loved Marathon Monday. There's nothing he loved more than volunteering on that day. And at first, my family was really concerned and embarrassed by all of my social media posts, and I would share resources and I would always share the helpline. And I was doing that not only to share that information, but to help me fundraise for the marathon. And then, through the entire process, my parents started seeing people say, you know what, like, I wish I knew that existed, or, you're really brave for talking about that, or, can I have Jen's number? Because I have someone I'm worried about and I'm not sure what to do. And I think that opened their eyes to like, wow, like we really should be talking about this because maybe we could have helped. And I say all the time, if all of my stuff helps only one person, then it will be worth it. And I think my family has come to believe that too.
So do you talk with your family about it now?
Now we talk about it a lot. Yeah.
And has that changed anything?
It has. I think it's changed our entire way of communicating with one another. Where like the first several years, like a holiday would come and go and we wouldn't even mention my brother. And now when there's a milestone or a holiday, we find ways to incorporate him, whether we're doing an act of service in his memory or just remembering, like telling a story about something funny he did, because he always did something funny, like at that holiday, or noting to my daughter, like she was his goddaughter, like Uncle Teddy would have been very proud of you today. I think it's important.
So you keep him in your life now, and you can do that because your whole family is engaged in that, and not just the way he died, but the way he lived.
Yep.
So did your therapist ever ask you about whether or not you thought about killing yourself?
Not directly, but so this year would have been 6 years that my brother has been gone. I had a plan. I was in a great place mentally. I was ready to ask my therapist to drop down to every other week. And then, something happened that kind of activated a lot of memories associated with the time of his death. And my mental health started to decline. And I started thinking, about suicide myself. And I was prepared to ask my therapist if she knew of any partial or outpatient programs that I could get into. But that day when I went into her office and my leg was shaking and I was all over the place, I was talking about all sorts of things without actually talking about the thing I was really feeling. And she looked at me and she said, Jen, do you think it's time for some extra support? And I thought, yeah. And I said, I'm not good right now. I don't know that I'll make it to my brother's anniversary, and I want to. And so she worked with me and helped me get into a partial program, and it was the best thing I could have ever done.
What do you think would have happened if she had just asked you, I see you're feeling really stressed right now. Have you thought about killing yourself?
With her, I probably would have been honest, but only because of all of the advocacy work that I do. And I feel like a lot of people are afraid to bring up the topic, whether it's about themselves or if, like, I think people are afraid to ask, are you thinking of hurting yourself?
They're afraid to ask and afraid to tell it. So
afraid to ask, afraid to tell. So it's like a dance. And I'm glad that she asked the question in the way that she did. Do you need extra support? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did.
Do you think it would have been helpful if she asked you about suicidal ideation, your own? Not just outright, not just the first thing she says, but where are you in terms of thinking about suicide?
I do think it would be helpful. And because we have a good relationship and a good rapport, like I would have been honest with her. There are other therapists I've had in my lifetime. I'm not sure that I would have.
What would keep you from being honest?
I would be concerned that they would just be like, you know what, you should go to the emergency room. And I know myself, like, I don't have an active plan. It's passive ideation. I'm just thinking, I don't want to be here. I don't have a plan. I'm not in danger. The emergency room probably would not be the best place for me to start healing.
So how could a therapist open that door for you?
I think just ask, like, not just how are you feeling, but, you know, knowing a person's history, like what types of activities they tend to lean on as like coping mechanisms. Like, she might ask me, like, are you thinking about self-harm today? Like, how many times have you self-harmed? When was the last time you did? You know, how is your relationship with food this week? Or how many drinks have you had this week? You know, all things like that. Or for me, like, she'll ask, are you maintaining your training plan for your next race? And the minute I say no, she knows. If I'm skipping workouts, she knows, you know what, Jen's not in a good, and then she knows to start asking the more difficult questions.
Just like your brother skipping work one day.
Right.
The marker that something happened.
That
but
something is
different. What you're
different.
saying is that you wouldn't even, if you felt that you couldn't have a real discussion about what you were thinking and feeling, that you would have said nothing.
Correct.
And then what's the consequence of saying nothing?
Well, I might not be here.
Because it might escalate.
Absolutely.
So you also mentioned that she knew your warning signs. How did she know that?
We had a lot of conversations around kind of what happens when I start to feel a decline in my mental health. And for me, I'm very well aware of what my warning signs are. And I don't shower. I skip workouts. I self-medicate with food and alcohol or shopping, or I take unnecessary risks. But it's taken me a long time to recognize that those are the things that I do when I'm not doing well.
It's funny because the way you said it is like you walked in and said, these are the things that I do.
Yeah, like, here's what I do. But like it came out in conversations, like we would be talking and she would say, oh, I thought you had a race coming up. And I was like, I do. But, you know, I just stayed, like, I hadn't showered in days. I'd skipped workouts. Well, what's that going to mean for your race? Well, it's going to mean that I'm probably going to get hurt is what's going to. Do you want to get hurt? And I'd be like, well, no, but like, it wouldn't be the worst thing. Like, it's clear I'm not participating in my own life. When she asks those questions and it's like, oh yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I am doing this because I'm feeling these things that are saying, you know what, you're not worthy of being here. So just let it all go.
Right. So it's interesting because you said like your brother didn't really show anything or tell anything. And, you know, in the olden days, we wouldn't even think that way or even ask about the things we know keep people going. We would just listen to what they said kind of passively and hope that they said something. So I think what you're saying is that it needs to be an active process that when people feel that way, they don't necessarily reveal that or even know that until you start seeing what the warning signs are. So, so you said that it helped learning your warning signs, connecting with advocacy groups and other support groups, running, anything else that helped, and especially from a therapy standpoint or
from a therapy standpoint
or anything like that.
Yep. So I am really a huge fan of acceptance and commitment therapy. For me, it's something that has been helpful because therapy has helped me identify what my cognitive distortions are, but they're so ingrained. I'm almost 50. It's 5 decades of this. I'm not able to just challenge them because I really believe them. So ACT lets me recognize that those feelings are there and it's okay because I want to live in a certain way. And that has been hugely helpful, as well as mindfulness. And for me, running is a piece of that mindfulness, because when I run, that wheel in my head stops turning and I'm able to be present. But there are other tools that we learned in the partial program that were helpful: anchoring and mindfulness, grounding, having a self-soothing kit, like little things like that, so that when I feel activated or when I start to feel like I'm starting to spin out of control, I have all these things I can try before it gets to the point where I'm just going to sit down with a package of Mega Stuff Oreos and drown my feelings.
So do you have a safety plan?
I do.
Have you used it?
I have used it once. My husband, my best friend, and another close relative are all aware of all of the things that I do when I'm not feeling well. And sometimes they talk amongst themselves and they'll say, "Hey, Jen, like, we noticed X, Y, and Z." But then if I'm in a place where, I'm afraid I'm going to do something destructive, I know there are people who know that I can rely on them, and they are trusted, and they know what the safety plan is, and they understand, like, okay, like, what do you need in this moment? And, sometimes my husband will say, "Well, should we go to the emergency room?" And it's like, no. Have you not learned anything through all of this advocacy work? No, today I don't need solutions. I just need you to maybe, like, let's just sit and watch TV together. Like, simple things.
That makes it better?
It makes it a lot better. I don't want you to ask me 27 questions about what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. I just want to know that somebody is there spending time with me, and, like, we can just sit. And after my brother died, that was the best gift I received. My best friend drove an hour just to bring me a cup of coffee, and we sat in silence. She didn't try to fix it. She didn't try to make me feel better. We just sat there. And honestly, it was the best thing that she could have done.
Is your therapist in contact or able to contact your family?
Yes.
They have contact?
Yes.
Have they ever done that?
No.
And has your family ever contacted a therapist?
No, because when I was this spring, when I felt like I needed support, I told my husband, "This is my plan when I go to therapy today." And if I had come home and it hadn't happened, it would have been fine for him to call her, because he's on the list.
So everybody knows that's an option.
Yes.
And that is helpful, just knowing that it's an option.
It is incredibly helpful. And that's part of the safety plan.
So let me ask you a question, because we only have a couple of minutes left. You have the opportunity to talk with clinicians about what you think would be helpful or what you'd like them to think about or do. Any helpful pointers you can provide?
Yeah, for sure. One of the most helpful things that my therapist did at the beginning of our time together was we created this timeline of my life. And at first I thought, like, this isn't very useful, but it helped her understand the dynamics of my family and maybe some of the ways that my family's culture and traditions may have impacted how I think. It also helped her understand better my relationship with my brother, because it was a very complicated relationship and I felt responsible for him. But she wouldn't have known that had we not talked about that piece of my life.
So I'm going to ask, a lot of people think that people won't or shouldn't talk about their experiences with suicide loss or their own personal thoughts and experiences of feeling suicidal and also overcoming those feelings at different points in their life. So what do you think about that?
I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I'm very active on social media. My grief journey has been public, and I've shared it without reservation, without any kind of guardrails. I share how I'm feeling. I share things that I've learned from other loss survivors, but I also share the hope and the community that I found with AFSP and other groups. And some days someone will send me a message and say, you know what, I really needed to hear that today.
Mm-hmm.
And people, I think, appreciate my openness because I think they're seeing it's okay to talk about this stuff. It's the same as physical health. It's no different.
Jen, you've been great. I really appreciate you sharing your story, your brother's story, and trying to help us to, improve our work with people who've experienced suicide loss or their own personal suicidal ideation and behavior. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow. Powerful stuff there, huh? Again, that was Dr. Jill Harkavy Friedman with a wonderful advocate named Jen.